Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 406. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another fantastic guest. I am super excited to reintroduce this week's guest, Yvette Webster. You may remember her from episode 368, where we talked about how to uplevel your outdoor adventures and take your hiking to the next level. In this episode, we change our topic quite a bit, and we talk about how outdoor adventures can help our mental health. This is a super important topic to both of us, because the more we talk about mental health, the more we normalize it. So who is Yvette Webster? Yvette is a full-time travel blogger at Wayfaring Kiwi and Kiwi and Haggis. She is a lover of nature and the outdoors. She was also the first solo female to hike the Scottish National Trail, an 864-kilometre trail that runs the length of Scotland, from south to north, beginning in Kirk Yetholm, ending at Cape Wrath. She is currently writing a book about her hike. So what are you going to learn today? In this episode, we talk about what is mental health and why is it so important. We discuss why we don't talk that much about mental health and why it's so important to talk about it, even when it's hard. We discuss some of the things that we've done in the outdoors to help improve our mental health. We share how hiking and outdoors adventures can help with our mental health, how to know when adventures aren't enough and we need professional help, and finally, where to go for support. I really hope you enjoy this week's episode. I think a lot of us have been struggling with mental health due to the last year of lockdowns and the weirdness of life, in addition to all of life's normal stresses. So hope you enjoy this episode. If you know anyone who is struggling with mental health who might benefit from listening to this, please let them know about this episode. Please send them the link to Yvette's blog post on why she decided to go back on antidepressants, which I linked to in the show notes. Please just spread the word. Thank you. So let's get into this week's episode. Hello, Yvette.
Hi, Holly. How are you doing?
Good. I'm so glad to have you back on the show.
I'm really excited to chat to you again.
And I think this is a super, super important topic, especially considering everything that we've been through the last year and lockdowns and just the weirdness of life these days. And I think people aren't talking about it as much as I think we should.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like the last year, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast.
Yes.
Okay. It's been a shit show.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely get it. And I think mental health is just such an important topic, and it's never been more topical than the last year. So
yeah. It's like the entire world has changed to keep us safe from physical health problems, but somehow the governments forgot that mental health is just as important.
Yeah, that's completely true. And I feel a lot of people have actually learned the hard way, like people who potentially have never had severe mental health issues in their life are suddenly having them now. So that's quite a scary thing, I think, to happen to a lot of people. I'm quite experienced with dealing with my depression and anxiety, and so I could prepare myself for it in lots of ways, but I think it's just had such a huge effect on everyone in so many different ways. And obviously, in the UK, the NHS have obviously completely redirected their attention to dealing with COVID patients. And I feel like, a lot of people have just really forgotten about mental health, or there's not like resources readily available for everyone just because of COVID. So, yeah.
So what is mental health? Like, what do we mean when we talk about mental health?
Well, I don't have a dictionary with me, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't think I'll have the perfect answer to that. But I mean, to me, mental health it's everything. You know, it's essentially just your emotional well-being, and a lot of people don't pay. And I think the reason that people don't pay a lot of attention to mental health is because a lot of the time it is invisible. However, it affects us in every single way. Like, our mental health affects our physical health hugely. For example, when you're stressed, your body produces adrenaline. You'll produce the stress hormone cortisol, and then that actually affects your physical health, because if you're building up too much cortisol, then it actually tells your body to store fat rather than burn it, which that's, you know, what a healthy body should be doing, is we should get our energy from our fat. And if you're stressed all the time, you're craving sugar, you're not eating right, and it has such a huge impact on your physical health, and that can lead to so many different issues, you know, heart disease, diabetes, cancers, all that kind of thing. So for me, everything really starts with mental health. And it's just such a shame that, you know, I'm in my early 30s now. I wasn't brought up, you know, knowing about mental health. Like, we weren't taught it in school. You know, it's almost like nothing can be wrong with you, or you don't have a reason to complain unless you can physically see what is wrong with you.
And I think that's a huge part of it, because, as you said, it's invisible most of the time. I mean, it's very intangible. You know, if you've got a shoulder injury or a knee injury, or, you know, it's so easy to kind of put your finger on it and say, this part of my body hurts. But when your mental health is not in balance, it can be so hard to describe or to even know what kind of help you need.
Oh, exactly. And sometimes it's just, you know, it is really hard to figure out exactly what's wrong. Is it past trauma? Is it because you're not eating right? There's so many different variables that can affect your mental health. And I think one of the key things is to just monitor yourself and be really aware about how you're feeling. And that's the thing. It's almost like you're just trying to find your way in the dark a lot of the time, trying to figure out, you know, how can I fix this problem? And sometimes you just need time. You know, I'm a person, I'm very much like, okay, there's a problem, I want to solve it, what can I do? But from my personal experience, when I've been having bouts of depression, I've been feeling really low, there's nothing that I really can do. Sometimes I just need a bit of time to let the dark clouds pass and to pick myself back up again slowly. So it can be really frustrating as well when you're just like, why do I feel this way? Like, everything in my life is going fine. I've got shelter, I've got food on the table, I've got friends, I've got family, I'm not physically sick. And it can just be so frustrating.
It's totally illogical, like you say. It's like, everything else is fine, so why do I feel like crap? But there are chemical things going on in our brains that, you know, we don't know about unless, you know, we get tested. Exactly.
And one of the really interesting things that I sort of discovered on my mental health journey was that, you know, depression is actually an illness. I mean, there can be external circumstances which cause you to become depressed, but when you're in a state of depression, your body isn't producing the happy hormones that you need to do things such as get out of bed and just have that mental energy to get through the day. And so I like to compare it to diabetes. You know, diabetic people, you know, need insulin and their body doesn't produce that. And so they need to, well, not all diabetic patients, but, you know, a lot of them need to inject the insulin into their body for them to survive. And that's the way I think about depression and antidepressants now. It's like, well, my body isn't producing this. And there can be a number of factors why your body isn't producing the happy hormones. Personally, for me, I think a lot of it is to do with my diet. I've got irritable bowel syndrome, and my body doesn't absorb vitamins and minerals, the way it should. And so that just causes my depression, essentially.
That makes sense.
Which is why I've kind of like, I do need to be on antidepressants to get by, because when I have my lows, I really hit rock bottom and I struggle to get myself back up. And I decided to go back on antidepressants because I was just sick of falling and falling and falling and just clawing my way back out of this hole. And in the meantime, the world was going on around me. I have to get up, I have to work, I have to make money to pay my bills, and I have to keep going. But when I'm low, I just can't keep going. So antidepressants have been such a savior for me.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people. So why do you think we don't talk that much about mental health?
I think a lot of it goes back, and I can only really speak from my experience growing up in New Zealand, but I think that, for example, when I was young, I grew up on a farm, and people on the farm, they're tough, they're strong, like especially the men, and it's not, talking about your emotions, that's weakness, showing a sign of weakness. So I think a lot of people are really scared to talk about how they're feeling because they're perceived to be weak, when in reality, speaking up and saying, I'm not coping, that is incredibly hard to do, and it's very brave. And I think people are only just starting to see that now. However, it is still really hard to ask someone else for help, and it's also really scary because what if you ask for help and you don't get that help that you need? So I almost feel like a lot of people are just discovering mental health now. It's only really been the last 10 years that it started to be talked about. And I remember when I was first diagnosed with depression, I was 19, and I'd kind of heard about it, but I had no idea that's what I was actually suffering from. No idea at all until the doctor said, this is what's wrong with you. Here's some antidepressants. Try these. Let me know how you feel. And I really had to go on my own journey of self-discovery and self-education, learning about depression. And then I realized I had anxiety as well, which quite often they come hand in hand. And so I just don't think the information's ever really been out there. I think it's such a taboo topic. It's a bit strange, really. I don't understand why it's only been the last 10 years that people have only just started to talk about mental health.
Well, it really wasn't that long ago that we took people with mental health issues and put them in hospitals and locked them away forever. So, I mean, not that long ago, there was horrendous treatment of people with mental health issues. So, I mean, even, just the slightest thing just got people kind of removed from society. So, we're not where we...
Yeah, like people were just ostracized, weren't they?
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense about why people have been too scared to talk about it. It's almost like, your instinct, one of your survival instincts is to fit into society. And so if you don't fit in, your instincts do kick in and say, like, you need to do everything you can to be liked.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you need to have people around you. Like, this is... humans have been on the planet for about 300,000 years. This is like caveman thinking. It's funny how it's still with us today.
Well, I think a lot of people also, because we don't talk about it, people don't know how to deal with it. So it's like when you start trying to explain to people, a lot of people are like, well, I don't even know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So why do you think it's so important to talk about mental health, even when we're struggling and even when it's hard?
I think the most important thing is that we need to talk about it to normalize it.
Yes.
This is why I'm so vocal about my mental health. Like, I love writing about it. And it is really scary to speak up and say, like, I've got depression. I'm not feeling at my best right now. I'm having suicidal thoughts. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be alive. It's really scary to speak up about those things, but we need to, because we need to normalize this. And I kind of forced myself to speak up about it, especially like on a public platform. Because whenever I was at my lowest point and I would see a celebrity or a prominent person talking about their battle with mental health, that really helped me because it made me feel like I was less alone.
Yes.
And I just thought, I'm going through all this shit and I want something, like I'm a strong believer in turning something negative into a positive. And so that's why I talk about my mental health openly, because, you know, if I can be that person that speaks up and says, this is what's going on with me, hopefully someone else who's going through some struggles will hear that and they will feel less alone. So not only do we need to speak up about our mental health for ourselves just to have that outlet, but we need to do it so that we're passing on, I guess we're making it normal for other people.
Yeah.
Other people can go, oh my God, thank God I'm not the only one that feels like this. And it's almost just like a huge weight falls off your shoulders. And then, you know, that's almost like a doorway is opening for you to go and get more help, or it's a doorway to go and talk to a friend or talk to a doctor or take action about how you're feeling.
Yeah, it's almost like when we speak up about this, we're giving other people permission to do the same because it feels safer.
Yeah, exactly. And I've known, actually it was in 2018, there were two girls, I'd lost contact with them, but, you know, they were a part of my life for many years, once upon a time. And these two girls both committed suicide in the same year. And you just wouldn't have known at all, you know. They were really positive. They seemed happy and bubbly. And, you know, they both took their own lives. And that's really, really sad to me. And, you know, I want to prevent that from happening as much as possible, which is, again, why we need to keep talking about it. Even though it is hard, like it is really hard. Yeah. I still struggle sometimes.
I know, it is. I had really bad anxiety earlier this year, like not just about a month ago. It was like the stress of COVID, the stress of lockdown, the stress of just this entire year. Then I had like a series of life events that made things even more stressful. And then I had a couple of family emergencies, and then my cat was in and out of the hospital. And that was like the thing that tipped me over. And I had like a few weeks where I was just barely functioning. Like I was doing my work, I was getting stuff done, but then little things would happen and I would just be like, I don't know if I can cope with this. Like I remember being like at the Sainsbury's self-checkout and I was like scanning stuff and like something didn't scan. And I remember thinking, what do I do? Like, do I just drop everything and run and just leave? Like, I don't, like, you know, on a normal day, like, you just call the person over and they scan the thing, but like, I could barely handle, I just wanted to run. And, you know, it's such an unfamiliar feeling to me. I mean, I've only had really kind of peak anxiety like that twice in my life, and that was at kind of really bad points in my life. So it was just such a foreign feeling, but it was just like, shit, like I can barely function.
And that's like such a perfect example of fight or flight mode.
Yes.
You know, and that's a really good indication. It's like, you know, your body's producing all these stress hormones, and we've still got our caveman brain, you know, or cavewoman brain, I should say.
Yes.
That, you know, our body is sending all these signals like, you're stressed, get out. And that's when we have, you know, those anxious moments.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I've been there myself. One thing that I realized about myself last year, in the peak of COVID, was that I was getting really irritable and angry, and I didn't actually realize it at the time, but anger is a sign of depression as well.
Ooh.
And it's really bizarre. So I was just like getting like like the rage over just small stupid things.
Mm.
So, and again, it was like you were having a flight response at the checkout. I was having fight responses, and it was just like silly things, like the dog was pulling on the lead and I was like yelling at her.
Oh, yeah.
People were kind of looking at me like, what's wrong with her? And they kind of made me realize, like, this isn't normal behavior. Like, you need to do something about it.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because before my anxiety kind of peaked, I was really irritable for a couple of weeks. It was like the slightest little thing. I was just like, "Argh." And I had no idea what that was leading up to.
Yeah, and it's like your body does send you all these little signs, because your mental health does manifest into physical health. And so, your body's constantly sending you signals and signs, and quite often it's not until we're at a really low point that we finally sort of pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to just like monitor our mental health constantly. And it's something that actually we need to be taught this. Like, this needs to be taught in schools. It's like, you need to be aware of your emotions. Like, for example, have you been eating, really healthy for 1 week, and then, something happens at school, one of your friends goes off and plays with someone else, and then all of a sudden you're craving sugar as a way to kind of cope with that. Like, we really need to like just monitor ourselves and to be taught how to do that, so we can actually nip things in the bud and stop things from getting to a point where we can't get out of bed in the mornings.
Yeah. Self-awareness is kind of one of the most important life tools or skills or whatever you want to call it, because that's kind of the key to everything. At least if you know what's going on with yourself, you can try to seek help for it.
Yeah, completely. And it's also, a balance too. Like, it's good to be really self-aware, but then it's also, sometimes you just need to get up and carry on rather than focusing too much on, something that went wrong and, how is this going to affect me, and getting all worried about it. It's a really delicate balance between being self-aware and kind of getting stuck in just being careful all the time.
Yeah. And kind of ruminating on, thoughts or feelings, or kind of excessively focusing on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a balance. So what have you done in the past in terms of like outdoors adventures to help with your mental health?
So it's kind of ironic, really. When I am feeling at my lowest, the hardest thing for me to do is actually to go outside and go for a walk and be in nature. And that's when I need it the most. So probably like the biggest self-awareness exercise in my mental health was when I hiked the length of Scotland a few years ago. And I spent 6.5 weeks by myself with a pack in Scotland, and I went through every single emotion possible. And one of those emotions was depression. Like, every single morning I would wake up and I would feel depressed. Like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to, I just don't want to walk today. My body's sore. I'm tired. I'm sick of being in my own thoughts. Like, I was kind of forced to process everything in my life because I had all the time in the world just to think, and I had no one to talk to. But I noticed a really interesting pattern, and that was every morning I was feeling depressed and I didn't want to get out of bed. And then out of my tent.
Yeah.
and then once I got up, I got my pack on and I started walking. It was about an hour into that walk when all of a sudden everything, the fog just started to clear, and everything, got into my groove, and I was like, yeah, I can do this. And I was feeling amazing. And it was the same pattern every single day. It was like getting out of bed was the hardest thing to do. But then when I forced myself to keep walking and to be in nature, magical things happened. And I found that I was an incredibly resilient person. And normally, like, if I didn't have to, get up and keep walking in order to survive, because I can't just, quit in the middle of the Highlands and just be like, okay, I'm done with this. I wouldn't survive out there by myself. Yeah. So I had to keep going. Pushing through and actually just having some sort of physical activity outside really helped my mental health. And that kind of just taught me, Yvette, when you feel like shit, just get up and go for a walk, even if it's just around the block. It doesn't matter how long it is. Just go out, be in nature. And every single time I've done that, I have a saying, I walk into the woods with all these problems in my head, and then I walk out of them and all the problems have magically solved themselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't need to have like hardcore outdoor activities. Just a simple walk in the woods for me just helps so much.
Yeah, yeah. And that was something, like you said, there were some days where it was really rough for me to do that, during lockdown. I just remember having a lot of resistance to it. And my husband would be like, go for a walk, get outdoors, even if it's just around town, it'll make you feel better. And sometimes I'd be like, okay, I'll do it. And then I would feel amazing afterwards, of course. But
I know.
It's such a struggle.
I know, it's crazy. Like, I'm just like, the last thing I want to do is go for a bloody walk.
Yeah.
I just want to lie on the couch with a book or watch Netflix or, and I force myself to go out and I just feel amazing afterwards. And I'm like, okay, like, I say that to my husband as well. I'm like, you were right. It really did help. Because, it's just one of the hardest things with COVID is just feeling like you're stuck in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are so lucky. I mean, I live in a small town. We have so many trails, like all around town. There's trails in every direction. And still, there was resistance because sometimes I just didn't feel like it, but I always knew it would make me feel better.
Yeah. And I'm exactly the same as well. Like, I'm so lucky that I live with lots of woodland trails at my doorstep. And I really feel for people who live in cities, in high-rise apartments, who have been in lockdown. That is really, really tough.
So why do you think it is that hiking and outdoors adventures help with our mental health?
Well, I think, it's the whole mental, physical well-being. Like, it really is tied together so tightly. When you get out walking, your body produces, I can't remember what the happy hormone's called.
Oxytocin?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of them.
Yeah,
but,
there's a few.
That's like a biological reaction.
Yeah.
That, it gives you. I also think that when you're walking, especially if you're going for a walk by yourself, it's just a really good way to process everything. I feel like when we're at home, we're constantly trying to distract ourselves with Netflix or our phones, or even like escaping into a book or anything really, but when you're out walking, it's a really good way to just process all the stuff that's going on in your head. And we need to do that. We need to clear our head and make space.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think that outdoors adventures can help with mental health because they require that we pay attention to the environment in the way that humans are evolved to do? Like back when we were hunters and gatherers and we kind of had that balanced distribution of our attention, like looking at the horizon, looking at our surroundings. Do you think that maybe that's one of the reasons that it helps? It's kind of like our natural state back in the day.
Yeah, because, I mean, one of the best things you can do is practice mindfulness when, you're feeling low. And mindfulness is just all about being in the present moment. If you're thinking about the past, you're usually like, things are ruminating through your head and you're almost like kind of like winding yourself up and you're just thinking, oh, I should have done this differently or I should have done that, and you're kind of just beating yourself up. And if you're thinking about the future, it's like we can never predict the future. So, worrying is one of the most pointless things that you can do, because at the end of the day, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Things will just turn out as they do, and you deal with them when it happens. So I think, being in nature really allows you to practice mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I think today was just, how the digital age has, sort of evolved, and how we are just constantly connected to something these days. I feel as though, again, that is putting us in the fight or flight response, because we're producing this adrenaline. We're constantly looking at our phones. We're constantly doing something.
Yeah.
And our bodies are just kind of in this constant state of go, 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 go. And I feel like just actually being in nature, taking things back to being simple, like, you know, we did hundreds of years ago when we were, you know, much more in the outdoors than we are now. I think that is really important.
Yeah, I agree. So when we engage in outdoors adventures like hiking, like you said, hiking the length of Scotland, there's a bit of mild to medium discomfort. You know, we're exerting energy, putting an effort into it. It's a bit physically uncomfortable sometimes. So do you think that kind of mild discomfort can help to cut through anxiety and mental health issues?
Oh, 100%. Like I have a saying, and it's, you know, you've got to make yourself uncomfortable to be more comfortable.
Yeah.
Because when you go out and you do something that is physically challenging and you accomplish that, it's such a confidence boost. Yeah. And, you know, you really learn about what your body is capable of and what your mind is capable of too, because at the end of the day, if you're doing something that's physically challenging, quite often the mental aspect of that is harder.
Yeah.
You know, for me, like when I did my hike, it was always harder in my head than it was in reality. So when you accomplish something, even if it's a small win, it just does give you that boost of confidence and that, you know, boost of happiness hormones. So, you know, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations really makes you, again, and it also makes you appreciate what you have. You know, when I lived in Canada for a while and I was living in a van, and that was incredibly uncomfortable sometimes because I didn't have a kitchen, I didn't have a working bathroom. I put myself in this sort of challenging living situation. And then when I moved into a house, I was just like, oh my God, I'm so grateful for having a toilet and a kitchen. And it's like, make yourself uncomfortable to then make your life more comfortable.
And also, as you said earlier, having that kind of mild discomfort of hiking or whatever it is that you're doing brings you back to that present moment. It brings you back to that sense of state of mindfulness.
Oh yeah, totally. Like if you're, you know, hiking a hill or a Munro or something like that, and you just, I mean, if you're like me, every time I hike a hill, I'm just like, oh my God, like why did I do this? I'm so unfit. This is so hard. This sucks. You know, every time I'm walking anywhere uphill, as soon as I get to the top, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I did this. Like, yes, this is amazing.
Can outdoors adventures ever cause mental health issues, like when people have post-trail depression?
Yeah, I definitely think that they can. You know, I actually did experience a bit of post-trail depression after my hike of the Scottish National Trail, and it was just because I feel like I'd learned all these really important lessons about society, and then when I came back to society, I realized there were a lot of things I didn't like, and you know, I had to integrate myself back into society, and I didn't quite morally agree with a lot of things. For example, just the way that there's a certain way to live that's approved by the vast majority of, you know, I guess the government, teachers, parents, schools, you know. There's a certain way to live, and I felt like I didn't fit into that box anymore after spending so much time learning about myself. And I realized I didn't really want to fit in. And sometimes that can cause a bit of friction. So I did struggle, and I felt quite lonely after I finished my hike. And I feel as though a lot of long distance hikers will have those same feelings as well. And I guess there is the aspect that you can push yourself a bit too far sometimes. You can put pressure on yourself to achieve things in the outdoors, or sometimes you might put the pressure on yourself, like, if I go and do this, it's going to solve all my problems. When in reality, we need to understand that mental health, you know, it's a scale, and we are going to move up and down that scale, and it's completely normal and it's completely natural. So it's just really about trying to maintain a healthy balance and not dipping too low. And again, going too high as well, that can cause some problems too. So just having that nice healthy balance and just realizing that, it's okay to dip down, it's okay to slip. Just, as soon as you notice it, just don't judge yourself. Just think, all right, I'm going to get myself back to a healthy balance now. How can I be kind to myself? What can I do? What can I not do? What should I not do? Yeah, it's trying to achieve that balance, I think.
Yeah. And I think so many of us are out of balance in one way or another that for, I think, a lot of us, it's been a while since we felt balance.
Oh, yeah, completely. Like the world is just completely different now. Yeah, like even, my career revolves around travel, and that's not going to be normal for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it's just, I guess, again, one thing the outdoors has taught me is to adapt to any situation.
Yes.
So when you're out in the wilderness by yourself, you do learn, like if something goes wrong, you have to solve that problem yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good skill to learn, is to not rely on other people, but to rely on yourself and to figure out things by yourself. Because again, when shit does hit the fan, you're experienced in pivoting. And so you find you can manage things a lot easier.
Yeah. I think that's really, really, really important aspect of one of the things that we can get from outdoors adventures. So sometimes people with depression can find sunlight to be painful. Do you have any suggestions for how someone can deal with this and, get outdoors even though they experience this, other than sunglasses?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I've never actually heard of that before. But I guess what's sort of jumping to my mind right now is that, sometimes if you're depressed, it can be incredibly hard to leave the house. Yeah. You don't want to get out and about, and I guess that would affect the amount of sunlight that you can handle. Mm-hmm. And so obviously sunglasses it's a pretty obvious one, but maybe just going for walks in more shaded areas. So for example, driving to a woodland, or just going for a walk through the woods would probably be the kindest way to introduce yourself back into light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or even I was thinking, like, if you have a park or any trees anywhere in your town, if you don't live in a more rural area, just sit in the shade. Like, your outdoors adventures don't always have to be like moving through nature. Like sometimes you can just sit in the shade of a tree and that can be incredibly healing.
Oh yeah, completely. Like just being still in nature is so, so good.
Yes. Yeah. So how do we know when our adventures aren't enough and we need to get professional help and support?
For me, I feel as though last year when my depression got quite bad, like I'll backpedal a wee bit. So I'd been off antidepressants for about 5 years and I had coped pretty well. I definitely had a lot of lows, but I managed to eventually get back to a more normal balance. But just last year, there were so many external circumstances affecting me that I couldn't control, that, I found myself in a really low place and I didn't want to be alive. I was having suicidal thoughts and I just couldn't function. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, I've tried everything. I was trying to talk to people. I was reading positive books. I was listening to happy music. I was eating better. I was meditating. I was doing all these things and nothing was working. And that can be so frustrating when you're actually trying, when you have very little energy, and you're doing everything you can to try and feel better and it's not working. That can be really hard. And I think, a lot of people may have felt that way before committing suicide. So for me, I was just like, okay, I've tried everything. It's time to go to the doctor. It's time to talk to the doctor. And it was really interesting because when I called my doctor, so we were having phone appointments at this time because we couldn't go in and see the doctor due to COVID. He had said to me that for the past few years, I had actually gone in that same time of the year with mental health problems. And he actually said, I think you've got seasonal depression. And I said to him, I think I do need to go back on antidepressants, because there was this stubbornness in me where I was like, I really want to try and heal what's wrong with me. And I wanted to figure it out myself, not with drugs. But then when I thought about it, I was like, okay, yeah, it's just like depression's like diabetes, you know, my body isn't producing that. I need to get it from somewhere else. So that was when I decided to go back on antidepressants, and I'm so glad that I did, because I feel like I don't hit rock bottom anymore. You know, I kind of just like, when I'm having a bad day, I feel like a normal person, you know. I feel like I'm experiencing a bad day like a normal person, not like a depressed person. So yeah, I feel like the most annoying thing to hear when you're actually depressed is all of that generic advice, like talk to someone, talk to a doctor, and you know, and you're just like, oh, it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, if you're trying everything and nothing's working, talk to a doctor.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do have to try a few different types of antidepressants before you find the one that'll work for you. You know, I've had friends who have gone on antidepressants and had a bad reaction to one, but another brand works really well for them. You just have to communicate with your doctor clearly, and obviously there's also talking to someone professional, talking to a therapist. I've talked to therapists and psychologists over the years, and I have found that to be a huge help for me. But what suits my situation is antidepressants, because I do have digestive issues, and I think that is a lot to do with it. And depression and anxiety is also in my family, so it's a hereditary thing too. So yeah, antidepressants work really well for me.
Well, that's good. And that's good that you had that experience before, so you knew that that was a possible solution for you.
Yeah, and I knew the brand that worked for me, and so it was actually really reassuring when I went back on them. And I didn't feel like I had given up and I was, you know, not solving the problems. It was actually solving the problems, because this is what my body needs.
Yeah, that is absolutely a valid solution to a mental health problem. Like, I think a lot of people are really resistant to it, but you know, if that's what you need, if that's what it takes, then get the help.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people, if they've got anxiety along with depression, there can be that anxiety of, oh my God, what is this pill going to do to me? Is it going to zonk me out? Is it going to make me feel like a zombie? Is it going to make things worse? You know, if you go and read the possible side effects, you know, that can open up a can of worms of anxiety. And yeah, so that can be quite a scary thing as well. But you just need to, sometimes you just need to try a few different things and just keep in contact with your doctor. And for the first 2 weeks, while your body adapts to antidepressants, you may actually have worse symptoms for those first 2 weeks before your body balances itself out and you feel better.
Yeah, and I think that's a scary thing too. But if you can get through those 2 weeks with, you know, maybe extra support from people.
Yeah. That's exactly what I thought. I was like, all right, for 2 weeks, it's going to be crap and then I'll feel good. And I did. Good.
I'm very glad. So do you have any final thoughts or tips or suggestions for people who are maybe struggling with their mental health now and they don't know what to do?
There are so many things you can do. Like, don't feel as though you're stuck, because there are so many different solutions to depression. one thing that I do personally for myself is I have a list of all the things that make me feel good. You know, it can be really basic things like running a bath, lighting a candle, you know, reading a positive book, listening to positive music. You know, I love interior design magazines at the moment. So if I'm having a shitty day, I'll go and buy a new interior design magazine and read that. I feel like if you write this list when you are feeling in a good mood, and you have this list with you, that when you do have a low, you can just whip it out and you can just pick one thing off that list.
Yeah.
Just do one small thing to try and make yourself feel better.
Yeah. It's
just be really, really kind to yourself, and just treat yourself as if your best friend has come to you and they're really upset because something's happened to them. Like you do need to be really, really kind. Obviously, like there's all this, you know, the generic advice, like talk to your doctor, talk to someone, reach out, which I think that's so important. But I feel like that message is, you know, sort of regurgitated quite a lot, and it, you know, those things are really important, and you should definitely do them. Yeah. But sometimes you do reach out and ask for help, and you don't quite get that help. You know, I've been to doctors when I've been feeling really depressed and suicidal, and they haven't given me the support that I've needed. And they've basically said, just call a friend when you're feeling low. And I'm like, well, I've done that. I feel like I've tried everything and it's not working. And, you know, they're like, oh, well, like things will get better. And you're just like, I know. And I left that doctor's appointment feeling really angry, because I was like, what if I was suicidal? And that was me asking for help, and that person just completely ignored my plea for help. You know, if you go to a friend and they don't give you the support that you need, go talk to someone else. And if they don't give you the support you need, go talk to someone else. Because some people don't know how to deal with depression and anxiety. We haven't been taught how to deal with it. We haven't been taught how to support people. So you just have to keep trying things, and just, you know, coming from someone who's been, you know, dealing with depression and anxiety for 13 years, I think it is now, things do get better, and it's completely normal to just drift up and down the scale. But yeah, just do whatever you can to, just try and just be really kind to yourself, and just don't give up. That's the thing. Sometimes, you know, it's really tough getting out of bed in the morning. Just don't put pressure on yourself to get up. Just, you know, maybe lie there for 5 minutes and practice some deep breathing, and then get up. Just be kind to yourself.
That is the absolute best advice. Because I know I often kind of give myself a hard time when, you know, I'm struggling, because it's like, I should be able to do better. I should be able to do more. And it's like, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't.
Yeah. And just make mental health and your mental well-being, make that a priority. Ever since I had my low last year, I decided 2021 is my year of health and wellness. And I have just been on this really amazing journey of doing all these nice things for myself. You know, like I've invested in new skincare. I've invested in nutrition courses. I'm learning about how different foods affect our body, and I'm learning about all these different things, and I'm just really educating myself about my mental health. And so, you know, knowledge is power. And it's a really exciting journey to go on. Like it sounds quite morbid, but I'm really grateful for my depression and how much it's taught me, and how at the end of the day it really has brought me back to myself. And I have learned how resilient I am, and I've learned how important it is to actually take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking about this. You know, as we said earlier, it's so important to talk about this so that we can normalize it and make it okay to talk about this. I kind of went missing from my email list for a few weeks when I was going through a rough time. And when I finally came back and I wrote to my email list, I got so many responses, not only from people saying, oh, I'm so glad you're feeling better, but people saying, I was really struggling too. So thank you for talking about this. So anyone out there listening to this is struggling, please, get support and get the help that you need, and be kind to yourself.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like one of the most rewarding things that has happened from me talking about, my mental health journey is people who have come back and said, I've been feeling this way too. Thank you. I've, reading this has encouraged me to go and get help. And it's just like, oh my God, if we just keep talking about it, it's just going to have such a ripple effect on the world, and we're not going to lose people to suicide, and we're just going to live better, happier lives. So just keep talking about it. It's really, really important.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad that we had this chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yay, me too. I love talking about this now. It definitely gets easier. The more you talk about it,
I agree.
the easier it gets.
Good. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. Have you been struggling? Let me know. I would love to hear from you. I wrote an email to my list a couple weeks ago about how I had been struggling the last few months, and really enjoyed hearing from other people who'd also been struggling, but I did enjoy hearing from them because it meant that they were speaking about it. So drop me a line and let me know how you've been doing. I am up for hearing from you, even if you've not been doing well. My email is holly@hollywharton.com, or you can find me online and get in touch there. I hope you have been feeling well, and I hope that if you're not, that you get the help that you need. And I hope this episode has inspired you to get some help if you need it. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to visit hollywharton.com/406 for the show notes on this episode. And I wish you the best. If you are struggling in any way with your mental health, please talk to your doctor, talk to your friends, reach out for support, get help in your local area. And as Yvette said, sometimes you need to ask for help more than once. Sometimes you don't get what you need the first time. So stick with it and get the help that you need. There is help out there. There is help available. And take care of yourself. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.